Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and today we're starting a new rotation, and this week we're talking about a topic that Christina came up with, which is how do you let go of distorted thoughts when you're already behavior free or at a healthy weight, if it applies to you, but when your negative thoughts are still in your mind and when your negative fears are still in your mind. This is a big question in recovery, and it's a very relevant question. It's something that I can definitely relate to. I definitely struggled with that for a long time. Once I became, not even when I like it, not like in the beginning of getting physically healthier, I started to notice that my mental faculties were just getting better. So that's the good thing about the motivators of continuing recovery, is that you start to see certain results and certain changes almost right away. There are certain ones that take longer, and then there are certain ones that begin to show up almost right away. So in order, I think, to have the confidence and the faith that the ones that take longer will eventually kick in as well, I think it's important to be mindful of the ones that have already happened. So I think focusing on the benefits of recovery that have already happened, that you can already see, even though there may be a slew of negative things still going on and a ton of hesitation and whatever else might be coming up, there are benefits, and there are evident benefits almost immediately. Then they will get better. And I'm not to say that as they're showing up, there aren't things that are also getting worse, because that is a part of it, yes. But the importance is to focus on the good, because if that's your focus, then you can maintain strength to get through the negative stuff. Now, part of the negative stuff is going to be those thought patterns and those things that have been so embedded, so entrenched, so tied in with the very nature of the eating disorder, that those very things are the things that made you question, am I my eating disorder? Is this me? Who am I? I have forgotten myself. I don't know who I am separate from the eating disorder. That's what the eating disorder is built upon, those thoughts. That's what gives the eating disorder so much power. And those kinds of thoughts, because they're so entrenched in the development and the maintaining of an eating disorder, often don't go away as soon as you begin recovery. It's going to take a lot of retraining the brain all by itself in order to get to a point where those thoughts are going to change. At the very least, before anything else, you have to remember, or we have to remember, that we can hope, we can maintain, and we can hope, and we can know for sure that these things are going to change, but only if we continue to treat ourselves well, and only if we continue to be as, follow our track of health, and not get discouraged that, oh, I've been behavior free and healthy physically for such and such amount of time, and the thoughts are still not like this. Well, why is it worth it then? Why is it worth it to continue trying so hard if the thoughts still haven't changed? Consider those marks of your recovery, because every time you think something like that, every time you get discouraged and you choose to continue on, you have just elevated your recovery a little bit more. So while you think you're just staying the same, while you think you're just not making any progress, just the fact that you're choosing to continue to be healthy in spite of the behaviors, that like strengthens your core. That decision is a huge marker. So it's a very active decision, even though it may feel like you're just going on and you don't even know. You can't even, it doesn't, you just, the benefits don't seem to outweigh the consequences, because you're still thinking in this way. But you are, you are making progress every time you continue to go and behave healthfully, even though your thinking is not right yet. What happens with the thinking is that with time and with consistency, it gets better. This is something that I was really unsure of for a while. The behaviors, the eating disorder, the way it affected my body and my brain resulted in some really unusual, for me anyway, like OCD type of things that I didn't have before the eating disorder. So that mentality was not just present in food, it was present in my lifestyle. It was present in my way of thinking, in my way of making decisions, in this rigidity, in this stuckness, in this paralyzed state that, if that was there, it was present a lot throughout my days. Once I was, even when I was physically healthier, but it was like the remnants of the effects of the eating disorder were playing out in thoughts about food and also in thoughts about other things in my life. So it's important to remember that you can retrain your brain, and you can trust that that way of thinking is going to subside. It's difficult to see at the time. It's difficult to imagine that one day you won't be thinking like this. But one of the things that really, really helps is to try your best to let go of a restrictive mentality. So if restriction, for example, is something that you've struggled with, and you're continuing to follow a meal plan, you're doing well with that, but you still have a restrictive mentality, maybe one of I shouldn't, maybe one of this is automatic sick feeling of guilt, this heaviness, this fear. Well, all of that is caused by trying very hard to maintain a grasp on control. A grasp on trying to control your choices. So one of the things that helps with that is to try to allow yourself to eat without just assuming that, without thinking that you need to rely on any kind of restrictive mentality or any kind of controlled mentality. You don't need to rely on that. I know it's a big fear, because we think sometimes that if we don't rely on that, because this is what got us through our eating disorders, this is what allowed the eating disorder to subsist, is that if we don't rely on this restrictive mentality or this controlled mentality, we're going to lose control and binge, or lose control and do something else, and binge and purge, or do whatever other things that are unhealthy. Just lose control and experience the effects of the loss of our control, and hate ourselves and shame ourselves. But the thing is that when you are eating enough and you are following your meal plan, the chances of that happening, first of all, are far less. Second of all, there has to, at some point, be, I'm also talking to my former self here, you have to be forgiving of yourself. You can't look at one, the feeling, like, say that you've eaten too much, and maybe you've eaten more than is on your meal plan. Whether or not it ends up being a binge, whether or not it ends up really being a bad day, you need to be forgiving of yourself. But it's so important to accept the ebbs and flows. And okay, you're behavior free, for example, and binging is not an issue, and these things are not issues. Still, try to stop if you are experiencing it, maintaining a tight grasp, maintaining a tight thinking so much about every decision, thinking a lot about what you should or shouldn't do. Try to let go of some of that and understand that if you do let go and see it through, because then when you do let go and you see that nothing catastrophic happens, then you will prove it to yourself and it will be that much more doable next time. That's part of retraining your brain. It's part of retraining your body to understand that if I let go a little bit, I'm still okay. I'm still safe, and not safe by the eating disorder standards, but safe by my standards. Finally, safe by healthy standards, recovering standards. It's so important to just try to let go of the reins if you can a little bit, and also sometimes it helps to have a meal plan planned out already so that you don't have to overthink it. Sometimes it helps to, as soon as you're done with a meal, to just switch gears and do something else so that you don't have the time, you don't literally have the time or the energy or the option even to really focus on letting that fear accumulate. It's okay for a while to be cautious and to take extra measure to not have to face things that are so scary that they may inhibit your recovery. So that's something that you would probably want to talk about with a therapist. Like, to what extent is it okay to keep yourself, to what extent is it okay to practice caution in service, in the name of keeping yourself safe? So, try to draw that line in between what is healthy to sit with and to process, because that's very healthy and necessary, and what is, how can I take steps toward not putting myself in situations that will bring about these fears and thoughts and a sense of really suffering, because that doesn't have to be a part of recovery, the sense of suffering. And this sense of shame, it doesn't. So shame is what we want to get rid of. Shame was all about the eating disorder, and we don't need to have shame in recovery. Recovery is all about being free of fears and shames, shame that, when it comes to food and our bodies, and recovery is really about looking at why are we ashamed, and what is it underneath the food and underneath the body that is making us feel like we need to shame ourselves, or that we need to fear. What is it about ourselves that we're scared of? What is it about the world that we're scared of? That's the real stuff, and it's been playing itself out in food, so it's been a very convenient distraction from what we're really afraid of, what we're really ashamed of. So it's going to come to a head when we are being healthy physically, and we can't avoid, really seeing it. So that, think of that as an opportunity. If something comes up that makes you scared, try not to put that fear onto food. Try to understand and connect the fear to what's really going on, what underlies that whole thing, what maybe, what prompted the eating disorder fear to begin with. Like, these are things that you can explore, in time. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do this all at once, but it's just good to keep that in mind, that, you're not, when these fears persist, almost in a PTSD-like way, it's so easy to go to the food and say, I'm scared of the food. But what are we actually scared of? And I think that's something very much worth exploring, and something that will really enrich recovery. I'm sorry if I rambled on and on here. I'm going to stop this now, and thanks for listening and watching, and I'll see you next week.